Hey everybody, welcome to Tea with Brittany Lea. I am just going to give a couple more minutes before we start, and when we start, I'm going to introduce our special guests, plural. Today we have two guests. That's very exciting. So I hope that you all have some tea. If not, jump up from your computer, run and get some right now. Right now, go, 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 go. Get your tea, go, and then come back and tell me what you got, because I love tea. It's my favorite. What kind of tea do you have, Sharon? You have tea today, right?
I just have plain old red rose tea, black tea.
But that's good
It's
though.
my favorite.
It's like a little caffeine
Yeah,
kick in the morning. And then I have
you
I
need
have green tea.
that.
I have green tea. It heightens the metabolism
Me
naturally, so that's good. And then a little bit of honey in it just for some flavor. So, what about you, Tim? No tea
Yeah.
for you?
Fill with water.
Drinking water, like he's healthy or something.
He's
I
not
don't know.
a tea
I'm a tea
drinker.
drinker.
It's Come on, Tim. Don't be ridiculous. You should have had tea.
Yeah,
He's good for you.
tea is good.
Right? Thank you. Okay.
Coffee
So,
anyway.
all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start because it's 10 a.m. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to Tea with Brittany Lea. I am so excited to have you all on today. Thank you so much for signing up to come. I have some very special guests with me today on Tea with Brittany Lea. I have Sharon and her son, Tim, and they are from Lynbrook Group, which is formerly PayPros. So, they are our VRMA show besties, and we just love them to pieces. And we have lots of fun every time we go to the VRMA shows together. So, hi, Sharon. Hi, Tim. Thanks for being on with me
Good
today.
morning, everybody. Good
Okay,
morning. Thank you for letting me speak.
yeah, thank you. So Tim and Sharon are here to answer questions all about chargebacks. Oh, that's so fun. And I gotta be totally honest. Like, when we first came up with the subject, I was like, I don't know what that is. Like, I have no idea because I'm not a rental manager. So sometimes I'm like, don't know some of the finer nuances of the business. So I'm really excited to be doing Tea with Brittany Lee because I learn a lot like while I'm doing it. So but one of the things that you guys were going to talk about today was just the chargebacks, but you're also going to go into some other like little things. And I got some email questions, which I'm really excited about. So I'm going to go over those email questions with you guys, but I have a few questions of my own that I wanted to ask you guys today so that we can just kind of talk about how to avoid chargebacks and what we can do to make our lives a little easier when it comes to that. So my first question for you guys, and I'll pose this to Sharon. And so Sharon, what is a chargeback anyway?
Sure. Before we kind of get started, I just wanted to say that there's a lot of gray area when you're talking about chargebacks. And so Tim and I are going to try to make it as black and white as we can. But we highly suggest that, after today's meeting or any time that you want to just go out and check the guidelines for chargebacks that are put out by MasterCard, Visa, and Discover and Amex. And if you just Google chargeback guidelines, they'll come up and they give a lot more detail about chargebacks.
Awesome.
So just to start out, then, a chargeback is when a cardholder disputes a transaction with their issuing card bank. So they basically go to their credit card company and say, hey, we want to dispute a charge that we made. And then at that point, Merchant Services is going to reach out to you as a merchant for a record of that transaction, give you an opportunity to fill out some paperwork that talks about the chargeback and, give information why you don't feel that this is an opportunity for them to dispute it. And at that point, usually Merchant Services, if you've provided all the information on that chargeback paperwork, usually the first time around, it'll get reversed a good 90% of the time in your favor, unless of course, it's a fraudulent card.
Okay, that's awesome.
So that's a chargeback.
Nice. Okay, well, Tim, this next question is for you. What's the difference between a chargeback and a retrieval?
A retrieval is when it kind of happens ahead of a chargeback. It's more of like an inquiry. So if a card holder doesn't recognize the charge, or they're just unsure, they call their bank, and rather than just immediately reacting to a chargeback, the bank will do what's called a retrieval, which is they'll just reach out to the merchant and ask kind of like what this is. But if you don't respond to a retrieval, then that'll automatically turn into a chargeback. So a retrieval is kind of the issuing bank doing you a favor and not starting a whole all-out dispute process. So instead, you're just kind of getting a heads up, like, hey, something might be coming. What is this? And so, yeah, the money does not get reversed out of your account during the retrieval process. Only during the chargeback process will the funds.
Okay, so does a retrieval guarantee that you're not going to have the chargeback charged to you?
No, a retrieval can turn into the chargeback. It'll definitely turn into one if you won't respond to it.
Right.
But if you do respond, then the issuing bank they'll go back to their cardholder and say, this is what the merchant is provided. Do you still want to dispute this? And then the cardholder will either do that or not.
Okay, awesome.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so what are the best practices to avoid a chargeback then? How can we protect ourselves from having to deal with this at all?
Well, I'll start with saying one of the biggest ways is to make sure that you clearly communicate your policies. So, for example, most vacation rental businesses use, you want to make sure that your agreement, which are your terms and conditions, so that rental agreement, which ultimately gets signed by the cardholder, you want to start by making sure that it is in fact the cardholder that's signing it and not just another individual. For example, if I'm using my husband's card to book a vacation on your website or call you up, you want to make sure it's my husband then that's going to be signing those terms and conditions, because he's the card holder, and ultimately you don't want to give him the opportunity down the road to tell his credit card company that he didn't review those policies. He wasn't aware that you had a refund policy or whatever it is that you have in your terms and conditions. So that's probably one of the most important things. And then, Tim, you want to talk about where it is located?
Well, a lot of the chargebacks start or occur when, in the vacation rental industry, when the cardholder is challenging the refund or the cancellation policy. Mm-hmm. So you want to have that type of language that talks about how they cannot cancel inside the 30-day window or whatever the policy is. You want to have kind of your most controversial policies right by the signature or the click to accept, whether they're booking online or just signing the rental agreement in person. You want to show or be able to show that the cardholder knew exactly what the terms were when they made this purchase. And also there are some tools you can use with fraud, like address verification, CVC code verification, just to make sure, to kind of filter out any stolen cards or things like that.
Okay, awesome.
Also, depending on the reason code, you want to try to resolve issues before they become chargebacks. So if you have a guest and they happen to be staying at your place and they're complaining about maybe the pool isn't working right or the air conditioning's not working or whatever it is that they're complaining about, you want to see if you can resolve that with them by maybe just offering them something, a few dollars off on the vacation or something towards a future vacation. Because if that results in a chargeback later on, MasterCard and Visa look very favorably that you as a merchant had tried to resolve this with your customer rather than having to go to, through the chargeback process.
Okay. I got a question actually from Stephanie, and she said, I found that with non-Amex transactions that retrievals do not take place. Money is directly taken out of your bank account before a dispute's even made. Why is there more time not given to the merchant to respond before the money is drafted?
Yeah, each card brand has different procedures and different guidelines. American Express is unique because they are the issuer and the credit card company. Whereas with Visa and MasterCard, the banks are the issuers. So you have like all the different banks like Chase and MasterCard. I'm not MasterCard, Chase and BB&T, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. They all issue Visa and MasterCard, so they can, you know, do things differently. Whereas American Express is the issuer and the credit card merchant company as well.
Okay, so they have like a little more control over what happens as far as chargebacks go because they're the issuing bank as well.
Right, and where you're getting the same treatment every time because it's always Amex the issuer, Amex is the processor. Whereas with Visa and MasterCard, it really depends on what bank issued that card.
Right.
So Chase might do retrievals more often than BB&T, who might do them less often than Wells Fargo. Whereas Amex, you're just dealing with that's the issuer every time. So that, yeah, their policies could.
Because like all the issuers, all the different issuing banks out there, and there's several hundred of them, they can do things any way they want. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that it's the issuing bank who is making the decisions most of the time on how this whole thing is going to play out. And even whether it gets reversed in your favor or not, it's the issuing card bank. So you could actually have the same scenario happen 2 or 3 different times, and maybe it gets reversed in your favor this time, and next time the same scenario doesn't. It's because it's a different issuing card bank. And that's kind of a hard thing. That's why I was saying there's a lot of gray areas. It's kind of hard because you're thinking, well, how come this was reversed in my favor last time, and now the same thing happens and I lose the chargeback? It's because maybe it was BB&T this time and maybe it was Wells Fargo last time. They can all do really whatever they want.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's go to the next question. How do you determine who has a dispute with you if the bank doesn't give you the guest's identity on the dispute paperwork?
Some banks will give you the cardholder's name or information, but a lot of them don't. So really the only way to figure out who the actual cardholder is to go back through your gateway. So for VRM, you'd kind of go through VroomPay, and you'd want to look at like the transaction date, the dollar amount, the approval code, and match that up with, you know, whatever guest that was.
Yeah, kind of search. You can even search. Usually they give you the last 4 digits of the credit cards. You can search that in the payment gateway, and it'll usually bring up the name of your guest. So it's pretty easy to find if they don't give it to you.
Okay. All right. How long does a cardholder have to dispute a chargeback on a sale?
Typically, it's 120 days. It depends on the reason code, but usually it's about a 120-day window. But in vacation rentals, it's important to know that it's 120 days from the time the service or the services was provided. Right. So if you had a guest booking in January and they don't take the vacation until May, it's basically in May when the clock starts ticking. So it doesn't mean that they can't reverse. They can still reverse the January charge in July because the actual vacation wasn't until May. So it's usually about 120 days.
And then Brittany, they do have an opportunity after that first dispute to come for a second and even a third presentment. So if the cardholder loses the chargeback, they can actually represent it and come back for a second and even a third time.
Wow, that's crazy. So they have a lot of opportunity to get their money back, essentially, for anything that they feel like was wrongly done during the vacation time. That's really
unfortunate.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how much time do we have to respond as rental managers? Well, not me, but how much time does a rental manager have to respond to a chargeback then?
You know, it depends on the reason code, but typically 2 weeks. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's only a week. It really depends on the reason code, so it's not the same all the time. But roughly an average would be 2 weeks. And you want to make sure as a property manager that you do respond on time because they don't give you a second chance.
Right.
If you miss your window of opportunity, you've basically lost out. So one of the most important things your credit card company can do for you is to make sure that you get the chargeback notifications in time to answer those. That's the biggest thing, because if you miss your window of opportunity, you lose automatically.
And if you had a chargeback that was for like multiple payments, like let's just say the down payment of 25% and then the balance due, if the guest tries to reverse the charges, make sure that you're responding to each specific charge. So you technically can get like 3 chargebacks from one vacation or one cardholder, but you want to make sure that you're responding to each one.
Yes.
Even if you're just copying and pasting the same documents, you have to treat each chargeback as its own case, and not try to just send one raw. So that's something you see all the time.
They won't recognize that because they're in different files and all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Right. You're going to be writing. I'm sorry. You're going to be writing the case number on top of the documents that you send in. So each charge will have its own case number.
Okay.
So yeah.
Now, one question, you mentioned reason codes, Sharon. Can you just give some like common reason codes that people might get when they get dispute paperwork?
Yeah. Okay. So no authorization is a big one, and that's kind of a good subject for us to take a minute to get into. So that usually comes into play when, for example, maybe the property manager has a guest staying and they've created some damage in the house. And when the guest leaves, they take the card on file and charge, say, maybe $200 or whatever the amount is for damages. And then the card holder basically gets that charge, and they say to their credit card company, I'm sorry, but I didn't authorize that charge. And that sometimes I think that in the rental agreements, a lot of times it's spelled out that they are going to charge the card for damages, but actually the card association doesn't allow for delayed or amended charges. So when you do that, if you haven't actually gone out and gotten the authorization from the card holder to charge their card for a specific dollar amount and specific damage that they did, you can get that reason code, card not processed.
Right.
So that's probably one of the big ones, no authorization. Also, fraud is another one that we see a lot of times because we're working in a card not present environment. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times people will say that, this wasn't me, it wasn't my card. And so one of the things, we do, Tim and I work with about at least 500 vacation rental businesses throughout the country. And there's certain areas in the country where we do see a lot of fraud. Mm-hmm. And so one of the ways to combat that with that reason code is to go out and actually get an imprint of the card. So you want to be able to, if it's a last minute reservation, you definitely want to, tell people you're going to be taking an imprint of their card. And then that'll help you out in the case of fraud.
Okay, awesome. All right, so the next question I have is, what is my recourse if I lose a chargeback?
Well, losing a chargeback is, people often don't realize that Visa and MasterCard and Discover, it's just an association with rules. And the ruling in the chargeback is just based on their rules. But outside of the association, that doesn't really hold any weight. You can still go after them, legally, in the courts, collections. So oftentimes people think that it's the final decision. I can't do anything about it because I lost the chargeback. Well, you're right. You can't do anything about it in Visa and MasterCard's association. But outside of that, you definitely can.
Right. Okay, awesome.
Now, obviously, if it's big enough, if it's a big charge, you're going to want to do that.
Yeah, definitely. So what about e-checks? Would that protect rental managers more or not?
E-checks, you can still reverse an e-check.
With no dispute process.
Yeah, the problem. Yeah, that's the problem. There's really no, at least with credit cards, there's a system in place. Although it's not perfect, you still have the whole chargeback process. Whereas an e-check, you really can't do anything if they reverse an e-check.
Right. And
it's a lesser amount of time, it's a smaller window, but they can go back to their issuing bank or the bank that did the e-check, and they basically within 90 days can reverse that charge, and you have no opportunity to dispute it as a merchant. They can just yank the funds out of your account and you're done. So you would definitely have to then go, according to your rental agreement in a court of law to get that money back.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy.
That's the issue with e-check, and also too, you don't always have a decline or approval right away. So sometimes you don't know for 10 days whether that's even a good check.
So Stephanie sent in a question that says, we also deal with services not provided when someone doesn't accept our cancellation policies. Guests have resources available to them, namely the media, that tell them that they can always dispute when something doesn't go their way. So what is something that you can do to protect yourself with services not provided? Usually that's somebody who would be unhappy with their vacation rental or, unhappy with the level of service. So how would you go about kind of saying like, yeah, you did actually get what you paid for?
Right. Well, they can, I see that a lot when somebody's trying to get out of the commitment. So they'll book a home and then they'll find one that they like better, a few weeks later, and they'll just try to get out of the original home by saying service is not rendered. It really comes down to making sure that, again, I can't guarantee anything that you're going to win or lose the chargeback, but you really want to make sure that you can show that when they booked this home, they knew that it was non-refundable, that they wouldn't be getting their money back. Kind of like when you go online and you buy an airline ticket. You know full well that you're taking a seat off the market, and that you can't just get your money back if you decide 2 days before the flight that you don't want to go anymore. So you really want to just make sure that you're again, I previously said, your most controversial language, if you will, about not getting a refund is listed right at the time of payment. And then you would send a screenshot of your checkout page to merchant service to do that.
Yeah, or if it's a telephone transaction, you want to always make sure that your reservationists are getting a copy of the rental agreement signed, and that you have that on copy. So like on the web, it usually, most people should have a click to accept the terms and conditions, a place where they can sign, like Tim was saying, and it's supposed to be within a quarter of an inch. Your terms and conditions and cancellation policy are supposed to be within a quarter of an inch where your signature is. But if it's over the phone, it kind of gets back to what we were talking about. Make sure you still get that signed rental agreement, and tell the customer that, until you get that agreement back, you can't put the house on hold for them. And so that, if you're able to show that, a lot of times that'll help you win the chargeback. Again, depending on the issuing bank.
And if it's somebody that's just complaining, like, oh, my house wasn't as close to the beach as they said it was going to be, it's not as described, then you really just want to keep a record of all your correspondence with that guest in writing, and keep stressing the fact that they stayed for the entire stay. They didn't leave, or they, because a lot of people might just try to go back after the vacation and see if they can, have.
You want it, there's always usually a description of the property on the website, or maybe through the conversation, the telephone conversation. So you want to include that description of the property where it clearly, lists what the property is like in your chargeback paperwork. So a lot of times, you want to make sure that that's included to not give the person a way out.
Okay, awesome. So the next question that I had on here is, right now people are switching over to the chip cards. How important is that for vacation rental managers?
It's not really relevant because most of the vacation rental companies take all of their payments online or in advance. So unless you're swiping cards at check-in, which most vacation rentals don't, it really doesn't pertain. But what it means is a lot of the fraud that was going on in the card present environment is now probably going to transfer over to the card not present environment because it's now really hard to make a fake credit card and go use it at Burger King or somewhere. So you need to, all those people that were gaining the system and making fake credit cards are probably now going to focus their efforts to card not present. So,
Okay.
So that's definitely, but yeah, if you're not swiping credit cards, it's not going to really impact you.
Okay, awesome. And I have this question. People came in and destroyed the home and did more damage than the deposit. Why did I lose the charge back?
Well, this is kind of one of those areas where charging for damages is kind of frowned upon by Visa and MasterCard.
Okay.
And a lot of vacation managers will do it, but if the guest goes back to their bank and says, I did not authorize that, or I didn't break that lamp, the cleaning lady after me did, or the guest before me did, that wasn't me. If they keep saying that, it's hard to win a chargeback because you can't prove that they did it, and you can't prove that you had authorization to charge their card. So if you're just keeping a credit card number on file and then charging for damages after the guest checks out, I'm not saying that
there's nobody watching you do that, and you can do it, but the problem is if they dispute it.
Right.
That's where the association is going to say, sorry, no, delayed or amended charges. But one of the things you can do, there's actually a couple things you can do. I would highly suggest that if you're going to charge somebody's card for damage, that you call them up and tell them, this is the damage that was done. This is how much it's going to cost. How do you want me to take care of that? Do you want me to take care of that with a card on file? Do you want to provide me a check within 7 days? Or and then if they just say, no, go ahead and charge my card, then you're going to follow that up with some correspondence and keep all that. Keep a record of your conversation, that they did give you permission, things like that to help you. Unfortunately, taking money for damages, I would say most of the time works fine, except for the few people that really know how to kind of beat and cheat the system. The only thing you can 100% protect yourself with is to honestly take a check and then refund it. That's a lot of extra work. It's a lot of extra time, so you kind of got to weigh out how many times is that happening to you. We see a lot of property managers are now actually kind of self-insuring, and they're just taking non-refundable deposits themselves and putting it in a little piggy bank, and they're going to have that money there in the event something like this happens.
Right. That's a really good way of putting that, guys. Thanks. All right. So I got this question by email. I took a reservation 48 hours in advance and charged the card and found out that it was stolen, and then I lost the chargeback. How can I avoid that?
Well, typically because of the prepayment in this industry, there's not a lot of real fraud out there, because if you're going to steal somebody's information, you're going to go buy, a Rolex or a TV. You're not going to go log online and book a vacation that's 4 weeks out.
Right.
So if you're getting last second or last minute reservations, like within 48 or 24 hours, what we recommend is to have the person come down and do an imprint of their card, because that's really the only way you can win against fraud in a chargeback, is if you have one of those imprinters and you're actually doing a carbon copy to prove that the card holder was there. So it's kind of old school, but really that's how it's still done.
If you tell the guest, hey, this is a last minute reservation, so we are going to have to take an imprint of your card, and see a copy of your driver's license, we've actually seen now where that is deterring the people from even coming if they have a stolen card. And Tim and I have had actually quite a few recent instances where that has happened, and they don't come because it is a stolen card. You almost need to be suspect when it's a last-minute reservation in their booking. So even if you don't have an office for them to come to, maybe you have someone that can drive out to the home and take an imprint. But telling the guests that you're going to be doing that will definitely steer them away from coming if they've stolen the card. So I think that if you don't have an imprinter, you might want to, go ahead and get one, especially if you are getting last-minute reservations. That will really help cut down on it.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. All right. A guest smoked cigarettes in one of our properties, and despite our policy that strictly prohibits smoking inside the home, per our rental agreement, we charged the credit card on file $100 for damages. The guest disputed the charge, and we lost. What'd we do wrong?
Well,
that
kind of gets back to,
yeah.
You charge somebody's card without their permission,
right?
You're gonna lose the charge back if they, dispute it. I mean,
a lot of times, I should say this because it's kind of important. A lot of times, those will get reversed in your favor the first time around. They really will. If you've provided pictures and proof that this damage really did occur, we see a good 90% of the time right away that gets refunded and the money gets put back in your account. What happens is when it goes into pre-arbitration, when the cardholder goes back to the issuing bank and says, oh, not so fast, I really did not smoke in that place. And they have no proof that I smoked there. And so it goes into pre-arbitration and comes back for the second time. That's where we see sometimes that the card issuing bank will now rule in the favor of their merchant. So it's the second and third times where you tend to have it.
Yeah, if they double down and just say that wasn't us, we did not do that.
They can get away with it, unfortunately.
We got there, they're probably going to win unless you have written authorization saying that we did smoke and you may charge our card, which...
And like we've been saying, when you do have a rental agreement that gives you rights to charge people for these types of things.
Yeah.
And we've also noticed that a lot of property managers have like a standard letter written by an attorney, and they just kind of, go ahead and issue that saying, although, we didn't get you through the chargeback process, you are still responsible for the damage that you've done. And that's what that letter kind of shows. So it's, even if you're not going to take them to court because there's not enough money to make it worth your while, you can still send out one of those standard letters telling them that they're still legally responsible to pay you.
Yeah. So does requiring the guest to sign the lease and pay the deposit on the guest extranet provide any protection with regard to the card not present argument at all?
Yeah, it just depends on their reason code. As long as they're not claiming fraud, because really the only way to beat fraud is with an imprint.
Yeah.
But if they're signing and agreeing to your policies, as long as your policies are explicit and clear about the refund and the cancellation policy, then you should be fine. The only thing that really people always put in their agreements but doesn't really hold weight is, we're going to keep your card on file and charge for damages. That doesn't really ever hold weight because all the guest says is, well, I didn't do the damages, and they didn't have authorization to charge my card.
Yeah. So would it be helpful then to include something? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry?
Would it be helpful?
No, I just say it doesn't make...
Sorry. The lag sometimes is like ridiculous. All right, go ahead, Tim. You finish what you were saying.
No, I was just saying it doesn't mean that they're not liable for the damages. It just means that you can't grab their credit card number and charge it.
So would it be helpful to include something in the VRA that their card will be charged if damages are done, and to have them like sign separately on that section or anything?
No, it really doesn't help because, first of all, the damages haven't been done yet. They haven't agreed to a specific damage or a specific dollar amount. So just that statement doesn't really help you.
Okay.
Just the fact that they've signed and saying you can, they can still say they didn't authorize the charges. It really needs to kind of be done after the fact, at the time you're going to really charge their card for a specific damage.
And like you said, just making contact with them and saying, these were the damages that we found in the rental, and these are the charges for those damages, and just letting them know and getting some, not only verbal approval of that, but getting some written approval for the exact charges that you're going to give them.
You say, how do you want to take care of this? Do you want me to use your card on file, or are you going to provide, another form of payment?
Yeah.
And just letting them know they have to pay for it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's your only recourse. Sometimes your only recourse is to charge the card on file and hope they don't dispute it, and that happens a lot of times.
You can you can do it most of the time. It's just the few out there that dispute it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Okay, I have a couple more questions. They might be a little bit redundant, so if they are, we'll just go ahead and breeze by them. A lady went on our website and reserved the property for a week in August. She booked this property in July and tried to cancel a few weeks later. We didn't refund her credit card as her notice of cancellation was outside the 45-day window outlined in our rental agreement. How come this guest was able to dispute and win the chargeback? So that goes back to the policies, not necessarily they can dispute it and the bank is going to take their side most of the time when they dispute it. But I'll let you guys answer this one.
You want to provide, clear evidence that your guest did understand the terms and conditions and did accept them. So and you want to show proof by showing a screenshot where they click to accept those, or if it was over the phone, you want to provide proof that they signed it and then submitted that to you. So if you can clearly show that the guest knew and understood your policies, a lot of times it will get reversed. Again, it kind of goes back to if they come back a second and third time.
Yeah.
If they still go back and dispute it for a second or third presentment, you could lose. Yeah. And it depends on the bank. That's the gray area we're talking about. Every bank handles it differently. Some banks are a lot tougher with their card holders, and some will give them anything they want. So it's, I wish we had a better answer for that. It seems a little unfair.
Yeah, that is. Okay, so we've had a lot of questions from people, but if anybody has any more questions, just go ahead and feel free to type those in. Go to webinar, has a little section where you can ask me questions, and I'll be more than happy to ask those for you. But I just want to take a second and thank you guys so much for being on and answering these questions so thoroughly. I did actually get one question from Stephanie that I wanted to just go back and read the whole thing. We talked about a little part of it, but I just want to go ahead and read the whole question so you can answer the whole thing. I've been told that the only signature that is accepted is the one that is an inch away from the credit card number, but we already covered that it was a quarter of an inch. Signing a terms and conditions may not be accepted by the credit card company. And I've been told that DocuSign as an online option does not help because it's not actually the signature of the guest. If a guest may never be seen by the vacation rental company, how can you bypass this? And have you heard of this as well?
I think it depends on the bank and the reason code of why somebody is trying to dispute it. If it's fraud, they're absolutely right. They're not going to win it. That DocuSign doesn't mean anything because there's no way to say that it was actually that person. That's why we were saying, if it is fraud, then you need to get an imprint of the card. That's the only 100% thing that is going to protect you. So it does definitely depend on the reason code that the person's coming in with.
It's enough to prove that they agreed to the terms, so it probably would hold weight in, certain reason codes, like not as described or credit not processed. But yeah, it's not enough to prove that it actually was the person that logged in. And so if they're saying did not authorize or fraud, yeah, you might lose that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I got one more question. It's not fraud 99% of the time. It's people that don't want to abide by the policies and knowing that they can get out of it because what they're being told by as a consumer that they have rights with their cards. So is there a way to kind of you know, let people know like sorry, that's our policies are legally binding. Are they legally binding and how do you enforce that?
You know,
Yeah, your policies are legally binding, but they're outside of the association. So outside of the association, you're absolutely right. You can take the people to court, all of that, and you want to do that if it makes financial sense.
Yeah.
That's why some people are just getting a letter written by an attorney and sending it out when it's like $100. You're not going to take someone to court.
Yeah.
But there is no way, unfortunately, to get around kind of a certain element of people out there who are going to try to cheat and steal the system. And if they continue to dispute the 3 times, because I think it's usually 3 times, yeah, unfortunately, they're going to get away with it.
Right.
And there's
like
really no way to protect yourself from people who are going to steal from you, other than through a court of law. But in the association, not really.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
would you say?
Sorry, go ahead.
no,
I was just asking him. I mean, but that's unfortunate, but that's just kind of the way it is.
Awesome. Well, I am so appreciative that you guys were here this morning with me. I'm just I was so glad to have you guys on. I just love you guys so much. And these are some really fun people right here, guys. And so I just want to take a minute and just say thank you so very much for coming and being on Tea with Brittany Lea and being my very first partner webinar. That's so exciting. And if you guys have more questions for Tim and Sharon, then you can always email me and I'll forward them on and we'll see. We'll see if they get them answered. But thank you. And thank you everybody so much for coming and tuning in with Tea with Brittany Lea today. It was really awesome having all of you on, and I will see you next month in January, and you were not going to want to miss January because we are having Michelle Smith on, and she is one of our training ladies, and she's like the diva of everything awesome over at VRM, and she's going to talk to us about mastering your 1099s. And so she's going to let us know, some basic tips because tax season is going to be on us before we know it. And I know some of you guys are stressing that a little bit, but no worries. We got you covered over here. So Michelle's going to do a really hands-on training on how to master your 1099s. So make sure you tune in for that next month. It's going to be awesome. And I will see you guys in January. Have a happy Christmas. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.